This episode of the City Manager Unfiltered podcast is sponsored by Holbrook Asphalt. Maintaining your roads is one of the most difficult tasks for any city government. The good news is the secret to making it easier is only 3 letters: HA5. HA5 extends the life of roads and reduces the financial burden on your taxpayers. HA5 is an innovative pavement preservation treatment trusted by over 300 public agencies. It keeps good roads in good condition, reducing repair costs and saving taxpayer dollars. Join the hundreds of other cities making the smart choice. Choose HA5 for longer-lasting roads and a healthier budget. Learn more at holbrookasphalt.com/city. That's holbrookasphalt.com/city. Check the show notes for a link. All right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America, and I have my all-time best-performing guest on this podcast. Massive downloads in my first interview with him when we discussed his trials and tribulations with our professional association, the International City County Management Association. With me today is Port Huron, Michigan City Manager James Freed. Welcome to the program.
Good to be here. Thank you, Joe, for having me back. It's been a while, but apparently we broke the internet the last time we did this.
We did.
Yeah. So, I got
to. You might have broke the ICMA, but I don't know if we can get into that.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. You want to talk about the reach and sphere of influence that you've developed. I can tell you from when I say hundreds, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of emails, phone calls, handwritten letters mailed to my office from managers and professional management from across the country. Some very large cities, like the time to reach out. You really shined a light on a situation that otherwise there would not be a platform to get the story out. Huge calculated risk in going on your podcast. Like half my legal team said, this is the craziest thing. You're like completely stupid. Don't do this. But it turned out that it was the right thing to do.
Do you think it's fair to say that the podcast influenced the ultimate outcome of your journey with the ICMA?
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah, we both took a lot of risk. It's funny. I have some people who pipe up every now and then, some haters or some critics who suggest that they make some pot shots or whatever about me trying to leverage my platform or what have you. And I have to remind them, I go, when me and James Freed first started talking, I had no podcast, very limited following. Nobody really knew me. I had no professional presence or networking with inside the sort of the establishment of the profession. And here I was going after the ICMA and Baker Tilly, one of the largest recruiters at the time, and at great risk and peril. And I'll repeat this because we had a very serious conversation at one point early on in this journey, James. And I said, "Hey, I need you to give me your word. Is there anything there? Are you burning me? Am I going to get screwed on this? Are you being on the up and up? Were you really targeted and screwed over by the ICMA?" And you told me that no, this is. I give you the God's honest truth, Joe. I'm on the up and up. I've basically been persecuted by this organization.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the case, as you know. What I will say, I think the value of the podcast is we all have our state associations. And so our echo chambers are relatively small. So I don't know what was going on in South Carolina. I don't know what was going on in North Carolina or the Southwest states. What your podcast has done has provided a platform across the country. So now we can talk about management issues that transcend the state of Michigan or whatever artificial boundaries we have here. And so throughout the last year, I have learned from talking to other state associations, like it's not kumbaya in the city management world out there. There are huge sects of the population within our profession who don't like the way some things are going, don't like how the profession as a whole seems to get politicized. So I think that was you provided a sounding board. We're like, well, wait a second, the folks down in North Carolina don't necessarily agree with this, and in Montana and Iowa, in Ohio, and so I think that's beneficial. That's kind of fun. The fact that I get to talk to managers from all across the country now,
Right.
conversations you wouldn't have at, say, a conference that some international group would have put on. These are real conversations that you can have real conversations. So I think it's a huge value to our
Yeah.
profession. I mean,
Yeah.
have you posted stuff that I'm just like, oh my gosh, he went there? Yeah, but I think don't throw the baby with the bathwater.
Well, here's the thing. I jokingly say all the time, James, that if you agree with everything I say, you must be crazy, right? The
Yeah,
joke being that obviously I'm crazy, but one of the best compliments I get, and it's the most common compliment, honestly, is I don't always agree with him, but we're having conversations that need to be had. And too far too long, in my opinion, in this profession, these conversations have been siloed off. There's been some self censorship, and there still is because some of these political
yeah.
issues are very sensitive. And I've had the courage. I mean, I don't mind to say that, or I don't want. I mean, I might sound arrogant when I say that, but I walk a hard line. I'm willing to take risk. I'm willing to roll the dice and stand up and say what I believe. And I mean what I say. I say what I mean. And you talk about getting hundreds of emails as a result of this podcast and folks being turned on to your situation and learning about it. I mean, I've had so many people reach out to me over the last couple of years who just say, "Hey, thank you for saying things that I don't feel comfortable saying out loud publicly."
Well, and if you look at look at our statewide association. We'll take from Michigan for example. It's run by a very cliquey group of people. And the old saying is, if you don't like it, vote for new leadership. Well, the problem is they had a nominating committee that picked the candidates. So when your ballot came, it was like you were voting in Russia, like hand selected, same like-minded people, same group think. And we hope you like your candidates, like Vladimir Putin. You got one option,
Yeah.
and so you can't change the culture. And if you say one thing that they disagree with, you're blacklisted.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely and you talk about. I look at all the big battles I've gone through in the last, I'd say 3 years have been like your crucible moment. But you get a lot of gaslighting from your fellow managers.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get gaslighted from the general public. On some of these major issues, I got gaslighted from my fellow managers. And now it's always easy to gaslight somebody as they're going through something until the facts come out, and then all of a sudden, whether it was like my case with my OSHA, um, we got gaslit on that, and then all of a sudden it turns out that we were right. It's just that's what happens when you create a culture where you can do that. And I think sometimes the clickiness and sometimes the group think really creates a corrosive culture. I mean, if you look at the membership for a lot of these state organizations, they've dropped dramatically, or attendance to their conferences have dropped because they've become toxic and hyper political. I mean, either you agree with us or you're blasphemy. And so if you don't agree with that group think or that worldview, and I have a very different worldview based on my upbringing and my faith and my life, that I just see the world in a different context.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up membership because one of the things that I find a little sketchy is that the ICMA does not put out or break down their membership in detail. At least I've never seen it as far as the number of members who are at certain tiers or titles or whatnot, right? So they lump them in a little bit. And one of the things that I've heard from members over the last couple of years, and I think you're also one of them, we'll kind of talk about that in a minute, is that the membership of the organization has been diluted to such an extent that so many more people are being allowed to join the organization who are not on the executive track or executives themselves. And so it's like, are the membership numbers increasing or staying flatline? But are they really the membership that the organization was originally ostensibly designed to assist or help in the first place?
So I'm not going to talk about that organization, as you know,
Hmm.
but I will talk about my state association. Our state association, under the guise of diversity, equity, inclusion, let's allow anyone to sign up to a certain degree. We have a listserv that was it's been around forever. The listserv is for professional managers only. So you have to be a professional manager. Of course, the bylaws dictate who can be a professional manager. Well, that somehow changed, and you had like junior staffers, people who went through like this class to maybe be a city manager were on there, and so like you couldn't even use a listserv because you didn't know if a clerk in finance downstairs was reading your emails to your colleagues, and so even that iced up, and you couldn't ask a genuine question about an
Right.
issue. And it's just, yeah. But I think I think people got the rub on that, and there's pushback, and now it's starting to change. It organically does that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. We'll unpack a lot of this stuff more later on in the episode. Let's kind of rewind back a little bit. 2024 was a hell of a year for me and for you, but James, you've had, and you alluded to it a minute ago, you've had a crazy 5, 6, 7 year stretch, right? I mean, when I look back, as I understand it, and I don't know how much you feel comfortable talking about these things, you've encountered, I believe, threats of violence and legitimate threats on you and your family because of things that
Yeah,
have been going on in your community that I don't think many
yeah,
people even know about, talk about. You had to navigate COVID, not just from the standpoint of being a public sector executive, right, and dealing with a once in a lifetime event that we're all trying to feel our way through in that process. But then you throw in the fact that you had the state of Michigan and you had Gretchen Whitmer, the governor, literally targeting you and your organization and trying to destroy your guys' reputation through some concocted false fabrication of some violations. Okay. You courageously fought back on that. Thank you for that. And we'll maybe unpack that if you want. You've gone to battle for executives all across the country with respect to the Supreme Court in this case with Facebook and whether or not your page should be your personal page or private or
yep.
whether that's a public record. Um, I'm not sure if you want to go into this or not, but I will argue that the Michigan Municipal Executives, your state association, abandoned you when you're going through these trials and tribulations with the ICMA. And then last but certainly not least, you had the ICMA go after you not once, not twice, but 3 times. Finally got you in theory, although I think the you had the last laugh there. Uh, Literally tried to ruin your reputation, run you out of the profession, ruin your career, take away your livelihood. And that's like what, over the last 7 years you've been doing with all this? I mean, that's
So
wild.
yeah, so I'll start it with this. There's a song I really like. There's a band called For King and Country, one of my favorite bands, Christian artist. Their sister is Rebecca St. James. They put out a song called "Everything Beautiful." You make everything beautiful, and essentially the lyrics are God ultimately, the highs, the lows, makes everything beautiful in the end. So I sit here and talking to you today, and everything's beautiful.
Yeah.
Go back to COVID. COVID hits, and nobody know what you were doing. I mean, we're all trying to figure this out. I thought the world was ending. We took it pretty seriously here, um, being the first to shut down. As the first municipality to shut down in the state of Michigan. I thought either one, I looked like an idiot, or two, it was the right thing to do. And half of our colleagues are dead. We honestly didn't know that. We had thought a mortality rate of 30% at the time. And so we knew when it hit, we're like, okay, we'll lose 30% of our employees. These are legitimate fears we have. The MyOSHA thing, and people can go on Google, you can search James Freed House oversight. That was such an interesting thing because when it's happening, you're in COVID, and then this inspector shows up and says, I have a general feeling. And it's like, okay, well, I have a lot of feelings. Doesn't mean we convict people and fine them. Um, and when he said that, I was just like, well, you have a nice day. And then it leads to a citation, which was all political. So essentially, what the governor did is gave the directive out, everyone go out and cite people. And so they're hitting up roofers, they're hitting up anybody, just write the citation. And then when we raised the flag, like, hey, this guy said there was no violation, there was no proof of a violation, but they cite us anyways, most people would have just paid the fine. But I couldn't do that. I mean, there's just no way, because the whole thought was is you're doing this to every business in town,
Yeah.
and how many of these people get credible? We had a business in town, large employer in town. I would say our largest employer in town. Myosha comes in and gives them a $3,000 fine because their workspaces were within 6 feet of each other. So the fine, the citation gets issued. They never bring out a tape measure. So the company's legal team brings out a tape measure. It's 7.5 feet apart. The workstations are. So I'm like, all right, well, I got someone else in this battle for me. Like, now we got two people that we can go. And then a week later, they call me, like, well, we settled the case. We paid the fine. I go, why? They go, corporate didn't want the PR. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, corporate didn't want the PR. So yeah, we did that. And what's interesting is, like, I,
James, I gotta interrupt you there real quick. This is, and we talked about gaslighting earlier in this episode, and there's a lot of gaslighting, and there's a lot of revisionist history going on in this country right now, because at the end of the day, we had people who are literally losing their jobs, their livelihoods, and I'm talking to you, Pamela Antil, out in Encinitas, who is firing her employees, and we'll get to her in a second. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see how what you want to dabble on that conversation. but we had people losing their jobs. We had businesses being shut down and destroyed by these policies that were being put in place by bureaucrats. And I won't even get into the whole, constitutional rights and violations of that
Yeah.
whole thing, right? So
Well, my whole thing is
that was serious business, James. And
we
it's
but we
like,
we were in serious times. Here's my thing. I'm one of those guys where we look back on it, we can money mortar quarterback, but when I thought 30% of my staff was going to die, I was willing to go to any measure. What I had an issue with is you don't falsely accuse people for political sakes.
of
And so
course.
when we fought the fight, I think that they never think someone's going to go to the mats, right? Because
That's
no
it
one has
right
a
there. Because no
no
one
one.
has the will to fight back, because it
No,
doesn't make logical sense to do it. That's
no.
why the case is settled.
I remember when we filed our appeal, I decided to get vocal, and I actually sent out what had happened on our state listserv, right? Like case documents. Here's our appeal to the administrative law review. Once the subpoenas went out, and we started finding out, we in the depositions of my OSHA staff, like what really caught fire was our field notes, which are copious notes, which you would use or primary source documents, you investigation, were literally burned in a burn barrel somewhere in the middle of the Saginaw Valley at a farm. That made international news. Like that made it. That's what set it all off. So that
Yeah.
leads to a House oversight hearing. And of course, the cases get dropped because it's all true. They have no evidence. In their own notes, they say it. They destroyed the documents. They violated records retention laws. All of it was just a massive scandal because we went to the mats. We
Yep.
had, but during the middle of it, we had this manager on the west side of Michigan. I'm not going to name him just because the guy is not the most intelligent guy and he's got a lot of challenges already in life, so I don't want to throw this at him. But he literally emailed the listserv. Like I put out the case documents, and like a week later, he writes, just complete gaslighting. We don't want to make the same mistakes Port Huron did and get cited. So does anyone have advice on this issue? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like you just clearly we're guilty. We made a mistake. And then like, I don't want to make the James Freed mistake. And it was just such a simple gaslight. I mean, it was so stupid. And I remember he called me and he's just like, I heard you're upset with me. I'm like, and I literally was like, go after yourself, buddy. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm hanging up the phone, go after yourself. We're done. And it's just stupid stuff like that. But then we lead to a House oversight hearing. We make statewide news, defending businesses and governments and all across the state of Michigan and what happened. It had to be done. And I mean, no one thought it was going to turn into like a field day with a House oversight committee, but the YouTube video, if you watch, it's pretty great. Pretty
Oh,
great
you
TV.
worked him over, dude. You worked him over big time. I mean,
I
that
remember,
was
I remember sitting right over so I sat down in the House oversight meeting, and like I knew I was at the hotel the night before, and like my brother came, and we're in this conference room, and I'm going over my notes, and he's like, I told my brother John, I'm like, hey, listen, like, I don't think you quite realize what I'm about to do in there, so like, you just may want to like keep your distance. I'm about to burn this thing down. So I walked in there, and you can watch the video. It's I would say one of my finer takedowns, but I did not realize that Bart Pickleman, the head of my OSHA, was sitting literally right over my shoulder behind me. Like I could feel his breath on my shoulder. So I'm doing this and right in front of him. And like in
and,
hindsight,
and James, for the folks listening, like you got to understand, like James literally, this is like the first time I really got a chance to even see who you were, James, because this was very early on in our process. You sent me some of the court documents, and then I saw the link to that hearing, and you eviscerated Whitmer's administration. I mean, you just tore it down.
it was I worked with a legal team to treat it as like a court. Like you're building your case, presenting your evidence, and then the takedown happened. Looking back on it, it was complete gangster. I mean, like you're just doing it right, but I didn't know at the time. So we leave, and like I told my brother, I'm like, we're like bolting, so like house security like ushers me to an elevator. The press is like the press gaggle at this point is like chasing me down the hallway, and I'm like, let's avoid the press. I did the Detroit News, and then I'm like, we're done. So we get in the elevator, and this guy hops on. I don't know who it is. It's Bart Pickleman, the head of my OSHA, and my brother notices his lapel pin that says my OSHA. And my brother goes, do you work at Myosha? He goes, yeah, I'm the director. And my brother just looks at me, like, I bet you didn't enjoy that. And I'm literally like, looked at my brother, like, could you, like, just the three of us? And I'm like, please get the one. Please get the one and let the doors open. Like, I told my brother, I'm like, why did you have to do that? Like, why? But it's honestly, I bumped into the guy probably 9 months ago. He was actually at City Hall here doing like a business training. and he's a pretty nice guy. I mean, you can't help if your staff goofs up. That was two levels down from him.
Yeah.
I don't fault him, and so it's like, I shook his hand and we hung out for a little bit, and so it's like that Billy Madison scene where they put the lipsticks down, like you're off the list.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's a classic. Yeah.
yeah, so but we did that. And it's like, we're going through it. It's like, oh, my state association was completely silent, and the only thing I did get was gaslit from a few members until it all shakes out. Then it shakes out, and they're like, oh yeah, we had your back the whole time, and
Well,
it's like, yeah,
and the other thing too, James, that pisses me off because it also plays with the whole ICMA angle as well, is you have the courage and tenacity to fight through it, right? To go through this battle
yeah.
all on your own, essentially. And then when you do get through it, the response is, okay, well, let's bygones be bygones. Let's move past it now. And okay, that's in the past now. It's like let's just quickly forget about everything that happened, as if like it was just not that big of a deal. And I don't understand that at all.
Well, my whole thing is, as managers, we need to do a better job in the state of Michigan as advocating for not only profession but the issues that we're not at the House hearings or Senate hearings really talking about issues as a collective body. We don't have an executive director. It's like there is no face for our organization. Well, that's something they should probably do, is get an executive director, some face for the organization to go testify for the House and Senate on
Right.
these issues that affect all of us. That's something I think they're working on. The new board members seem to understand that we lack that face and voice in Lansing. But yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, hey, it was well worth the fight. But I will tell you, you get stressed out the whole time. I mean, I, I look at you moved right into that too. At the same time, simultaneously, some creep on Facebook I block on Facebook. It's my personal Facebook page, not my city page. Had it since college. It's all pictures of my wife and kids, like, and my dog. And then, he's a prison inmate, stalker, felon. I think he's got like 13 convictions, been incarcerated like 27 times. He's currently a fugitive on the run from justice, for PPO violations, stalking, assaulted people at a county meeting. Literally started a brawl at a county meeting, assaulted somebody, and got sentenced to jail for it.
Is this the
Um,
guy who's actually showing up at your city council meetings
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
harassing
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
This guy showed up at my city council meetings and just throw horrible accusations, slander out there. He did it all for attention, right? So he sues me. I win in district court. He appeals to the Sixth Circuit. I win before the Sixth Circuit. He appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court. And what was really nice is, it's now remanded, but the Supreme Court, we call it duty and authority, right? So that was the test I had. He was arguing, if it appears official, if it even looks official, therefore it is official. What was really nice is the Supreme Court ruled in our favor and adopted a far more narrow test, that not only are you utilizing your duty and authority, but you are vocally saying, I am speaking on behalf of my duty and authority and using it. So we'll have to, I mean, we're remanded, but we'll clearly win. But I think the Washington Post, I think the USA Today was actually declared as a huge win for local governments, because you can't have private pages. You can have a private life. Um,
And yeah, absolutely.
it's moot now because I deleted the page. I mean, this guy's still out there stalking my family, harassing my family. I get pictures wherever I go around town. People take photos of me, post them online. But whatever. It's part of the world we live in now. I travel all over the state of Michigan, working with other cities and other municipalities, doing consulting work, and this is like on par for the course. Like, this isn't like some unique Port Huron thing. There's creepy stalkers now going after city managers, slandering city managers for no reason, just for sport, for the clicks.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new dynamic that we have to deal with. It's the stress of that, and how do you put up with that, and how to deal with it. And you can't really sue for defamation for these folks because they're uncollectible.
They're judgment proof. Yeah, they're judgment
Yeah,
proof.
yeah, they're uncollectible, and they want you to sue so they can have a platform. Please sue,
Yeah.
so I get on the front page. And so, I mean, it's just the world we live in. So I went through that. So I had the MIOSHA, then I had the Supreme Court case brewing the whole time behind that. And so there's a couple moments of like feeling, and then of course then we had the ICMA case, and everyone knows that. I don't even need to talk about it. I think your podcast did an amazing job highlighting the issues of the case, highlighting the facts of the case. And we were never countersued, were we?
No.
We were never countersued. How about that? How about that? We were never. That should tell people something. And so it's like I still remember like walking out of the House oversight hearing, and then another moment is like walking into the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has their own like version of the Secret Service, their own Supreme Court police, and they understand that they know, like, all the court clerks and the Supreme Court clerks, they brief like the other side's clearly nuts. This guy's a felon, criminal, assaulter, stalker, stalks men and women, children in this town. So they escort me up the stairs. I'm getting walked up this marble staircase. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Supreme Court. It's a pretty gorgeous building. Not as big as you would think. Like you get into the room and you're like, oh, this is crazy. I get walked up and I'm walking with my wife and they give you, I mean, there's security, but these folks take security. Like there's not like just like we search you. They search you 3 different times before you walk in there. Like you're
Wow.
searched 3 different times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're 3 different times. You're pretty much strip searched. No phone, Apple Watch, everything's off, locked in a secure box. And I'm walking up the stairs, and you're just like, well, I remember the SUV. They sent this, so the Tahoes come and pick us up. So you walk out of the George, which is the hotel in Lansing. That's my favorite hotel. And these Tahoes are picking you up, and my dad's there. And so we get loaded up in these Tahoes, and security's driving us across. And I see the U.S. Capitol, and you're coming around the back end of it to get to the Supreme Court. And I look at my dad and go, well, Dad, I guess I'm the first kid that got you to SCOTUS. And he's like, yeah, I guess that's something, But you're walking in, and then you go to sit down before the Supreme Court, and then you see Justice Roberts come in, Elena Kagan come in, Ketanji Brown walks in, Amy Coney Barrett, who I'm a huge fan of, Clarence Thomas, who's one of my role models. And then they start talking about my dog and pictures of my dog on my Facebook post. And I just
Seriously?
wrote, yeah, they were talking about like photos of my dog, the raccoons in the back. I posted about the raccoons getting my trash. And like Justice Roberts talked about Winston, my dog, and the raccoons in my backyard. And I'm like, it was so surreal that I just wrote to my wife, because you can pass notes. I just wrote, this is crazy. Like, this is crazy that I'm here in DC. And like, you just have this moment, like, I'm a small town guy. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like this, let's just say, how do I say this? Like, I'm not a big deal, right? So like when you have the House Oversight meeting, you're just like, wow, that was crazy. Then you're at SCOTUS and you're like, this is insane. How can this be happening to me? And it's like, I look back now, and then you go into, and you roll into ICMA, and we all know what happened there. But I go back and look at it, and it's like, it's really where my faith comes in. You're going through that, and like, man, I'm on blood pressure medicine now, on cholesterol medicine. I've gained like 15 pounds
You
trying to
got some
knock
great,
that down.
got some gray hairs up there too, there, James.
Well,
I
the gray
mean,
was always there. I was just fermenting it. So I'm almost like, so it's like, it took a physical toll on me for the last like
I bet
three
it did.
years.
I bet it
So
did.
now I'm back getting myself in shape, and I'm trying to work on my I'm like, don't even eat soups anymore because of sodium. And I actually joke around every time there's a conference, right? And this is true. You'll be at like the hotel bar with a bunch of other managers, and someone will walk in and be like, oh man, did you see Bob over there? He gained like 15 pounds. And it's like, I'm that guy this year. I was like, I'm so pissed. I'm gonna be that guy this year. So, but it's like, I'm taking the physical toll, but I go back and I look at my life, and it's like, how did I get through that? How did I handle those moments? And I just go back to, I just wasn't alone. I mean, the old,
Well, you're going right where I want to go next, and
yeah.
talk about the impact it's had on your wife, your family. I mean, God, she's been through a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, think of my in-laws looking in like, God, could she have married something a little less complicated? Um, and it's one of those things, like you're explaining this the whole time. It's getting press, whether it's Myosha or SCOTUS. You're trying to explain to friends and family, like, no, this is not what happened. There's more to it. Even with the ICMA, like, no, this is more to it. Um, and it's like, you don't know if vindication's ever going to come.
That's
Right?
right.
You don't know if you're gonna get your House Oversight hearing. You don't know if you're gonna get your win at the Supreme Court. You just don't
Right.
know that. And so the stress of it was really something, and it really, I mean, and I had 2 little kids at the time. So the whole time I'm thinking, uh, I gotta not only do this for my kids and their generation, but at some time I gotta make sure I maintain my job and able to get a paycheck for my family. And so, because these are all things, imagine 3 big issues my council has to deal with the political consequences of it as well.
Yep.
Your city manager's at the Supreme Court. You got a Myosha case on the front page of the paper, and I got the ICMA thing. So luckily it all worked out well. But yeah, I think I look back and there's no way I could have made it the last 3 years if it wasn't for my faith and my family. And you take stock in what's important. I do not get upset by little things. Like my wife will call me, something's wrong with the Amazon order. I'm like, man, I wish I could be worried about that today. I wish that is something I could be worried about. But yeah, it was a wild journey.
Yeah.
I'm alive. I'll just say that I'm alive.
Yeah. You're on this side of the ground, right? You know, I was talking to Seth Winterhalter. I don't know if you know that name. He's kind of been growing in the space, at least on LinkedIn. He's a former pastor who's now gone into executive coaching for public sector executives. And we've been building a little bit of a relationship. And I was having a conversation with him recently because we were talking a little bit about the upcoming conference for the American Association of Municipal Executives. And I was having a conversation with him about spouses and how we don't really give enough attention in this profession. I think we kind of um, don't really talk about it enough. I've tried to over the last couple of years give it a little bit more attention. But spouses, our wives, our husbands, they go through a lot in this process of us being public sector executives.
They
And he
do.
was sharing with me a story about when he was a pastor, and he said that I hope I got this right, but he was essentially saying something along the lines of, when you're a pastor, similar to like a public sector executive, you don't have the luxury or ability to go and complain and whine to anybody
No.
else outside of your immediate family, right? Your wife, essentially, or your husband, or whatever. And he said, one of the things that we would see happen time to time in sort of pastoral leadership is you would have these wives who would start developing resentment towards the church or to the religion or to their faith because all they're seeing is their husband in this context for the most part going through these trials and tribulations of being a pastor, right? And all the stuff that they have to endure and all the negatives that come along with that job, how it encroaches upon, they're always on 24/7, right? Similar to executives when it comes to taking care of their quote unquote flock, right, James? And so he was talking about how it's very easy for our spouses because they're protective of us, they love us, that they could start having this sort of shell built up and this anger and all these other things because they're just forced to watch it and endure it. They don't really have an outlet themselves to even communicate this stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that in general as far as this profession and the
Well,
family component?
I think it's 100% true. The stress on, and then you're just like, when you're under stress, you're not a good husband, right? Like when I'm going through this, like at 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, like I don't want to talk to Jesse. I want to sit there and think about all that's going on, right?
Right.
And so she had to put up with that, which was really hard. I mean, it's like all I was thinking about. She's like, "Well, just don't think about it." I'm like, I cannot not think about
You don't
these
have the
things.
luxury. Yeah. Like I
Yeah,
wish
and
I
it's like,
could.
and you're not the one who may not get a job ever again, and I got to pay for these two kids, and it's like you look at these. The most stress I had is like you're sitting there looking at your two little girls, and like I would just watch them play in the living room, and be like, oh my gosh, have I ruined their life? Like, have I screwed up so bad I've ruined their life? Because everyone, if you can't provide for your family or something like that. My wife is a ferocious woman. I mean, she is a Jackie Kennedy, very articulate, very polished, but also a scrappy street fighter if need to be. I mean, when we were going through the ice, when we were going through SCOTUS and even ICMA, she's like, we're going to the mats. We're going to the mats.
Yeah.
When we were going to DC, she's like, we're going to go to DC and put this nutcase back behind bars. When we were going through Myosha, she knew what I was doing. She's like, you're going to go there. And the night before, she's like, you're going to go drive over there and burn it to the ground, or I will for you. I mean, it was
Yeah.
that type of ferocity.
Ride
And
or
so,
die, huh?
well, I think when you know the stakes, I mean, we're at the point now, and then it's like, and I keep telling Jesse, I was like, what is God preparing for us to do? Like, we're young. I'm going to be, I'm 39. I can't believe I'm going to say I'm 40 in March. She's 35.
Don't say. Don't say.
Yeah, 35. And
Maybe I'll
it's
edit
like,
that out.
yeah, so it's like, yeah. So it's like, where are we go? Like we've forged this partnership now where it's like, we're ready for like things that matter. And we've had the conversation, like, um, it's so cliche to say like when you have kids, everything changes, but
Right.
everything changes. And now I start thinking about things like education policy and energy policy and things that are going on around this. I'm really upset about things that are going on in the state right now. I mean, that will affect my children, their ability to get a job.
Yeah.
Um, 60% of third graders in the state of Michigan can't read or write to grade level.
It's
60%. We have some of the highest energy costs in the entire country right now, because of our bad energy policies. It's costing us jobs in factories. And if you are a low to moderate income person in the Upper Peninsula, this winter is just going to be terrible for you and your family.
do they
You
mean the
got
heating oil? You guys are using the heating
oh
oil? Is that what
yeah,
it is? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, the cost of heating oil. Even natural gas is on the rise. Electricity is just the rate increases in electricity in the state because they have to fund these RPS standards is killing people. But I started thinking about things like that. But yeah, no, back to my wife. Yeah, she's the other thing is your wife has to know who you are. I think that's my wife was there from the beginning to the end of each one of these issues. She knows what truly happened, and she was ready to fight with me. So I'm very blessed with her. Um, we've been taking a lot of trips, my friend. A lot of Florida trips lately. I feel like it's she. There's I don't want to say I am indentured, but she definitely knows like she's got the goods. And so she knows like I owe her a lot. So like we have gone like we just touched down from Florida and it's like, where do you want to go, babe? I mean, we're already booking flights for the next one. So I got some paying back to her. She's
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah, the bathroom's getting redone and the house got painted and there's times you just shut up and know you owe it to her. So
Absolutely, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my wife, who's just been an amazing rock for me when it comes to my journey or our journey, because I've 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 put her through some trials and tribulations myself, James. So I'm sure she could have had an easier road with a with a different gentleman. Let's put it that way.
sometimes your mom's right. Like my mother-in-law's like, I told you so. That's all she says. I told you so, Jesse. Knew it was gonna be like this.
Hey, let's well, I'm kind of curious. We talk a lot about ICMA and stuff in the past, and that's kind of what people know you for. I wanted to really kind of delve into some of the bigger picture stuff, and we've already kind of started going down that road. Is to kind of get a better sense of who you are as a person, as a professional manager, executive, that whole
Yep.
deal. What do you see right now as the state of the profession? Not let's not talk about Michigan per se right this moment. We can come back to Michigan at the state level if you want to expand on that, but just when you look at the totality of the profession and where things are going, where do you see for this profession as we move forward in the next 10 years?
Well, I think the it was so you look at we're a nonpartisan profession, right?
We're supposed to be.
Eh, yeah, and that's back when I mean, you look at the Democratic Republican issues 30 years ago versus they were a little bit more clear cut, right? Much more clear cut. Tax policy, energy policy, whatever it is. Much more clear cut than they are today. Today, everything is politicized and every political party has an opinion on everything. And so it's very hard to not become a political organization. Um, and then I also think we have the I think this the leftist mob culture in America has creeped its way into our profession as well. I mean, a lot of the people when I got cited by my OSHA was like, "Good, glad they got him," and
Yeah.
it's like, or even with SCOTUS, like, why'd you block someone on your own personal Facebook? You got what's coming to you, and even with the ICMA case, it's like, keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut. You want these issues, and it's like when we lose the ability to speak and have candid conversations in our profession, I think we crossed that Rubicon. I think that did happen, especially when your state association is run by a very small clique. It's very difficult to change. Now,
Yeah.
and now me and my colleagues have brought light to that in the state, and they've changed their nominating process, and the MME is self-correcting as it should. Um, but you have to have that culture where we can disagree. Like you should be able to disagree. You should be able to have conversations, and not take your political partisanship out on your colleagues. Like they don't agree with me, therefore they're not a good manager. Uh, and that happened.
Well, yeah, and I think a theory or something I've been playing with or wrestling with for a long time is that I believe that there's definitely been a rise in the partisan rancor at the local level. I don't doubt that or dispute that. The the nuance that I see and I think needs to sort of be articulated is, in my opinion, and people are welcome to disagree, is that if an individual has a right of center political viewpoint, that is categorized as being political or an activist or what have you. Whereas if you have a viewpoint that is left of center, it is categorized as good policy or good government, and or has other sort of self-righteous moral superlatives about being better than this other side or what have you. And so as I've looked at the evolution of local government, and again, this is my opinion, people are welcome to disagree, what I've seen is that conservatives in the country have become much more engaged at the local level, whether it's at the municipal level or school districts, than they ever have in the past. And when I was growing up watching sort of the politics play out, conservatives were far more engaged at the state and federal level than they were at the local level. And I think what's going on is now that you have these individuals who are getting more engaged at the local level, and there's this pushback to the leftward sort of shift that's been going on in local government for decades and eons, that all of a sudden it's being categorized as, oh, now it's political. It's always been political, in my opinion.
It's always been political, but the problem is we stopped talking about important issues. So, like, if you go look through your like the training agendas for conferences for any association around the country. So, any state association, we stopped talking about important issues and went to much more trivial things. We got to so many sessions on DEI, but not really sessions on actual policy like infrastructure policy, funding policy. We have significant structural problems in the state of Michigan that a lot of them are constitutional. The 1963 Constitutional Convention did not do any favors for local government in Michigan. Unlike other states, we have what's called charter townships, so you can't merge with a charter township or annex some of that property. So as your community grows or as urban sprawl happens, you can essentially increase your footprint like they do in, for instance, Canada. I mean, Canada has a very, really interesting local government model that works. And other states do. Look at Indiana. Indiana dissolved townships at one point. In, I think 2006 or 7, I was there for that when I was in undergrad. But we have structural issues that have to happen, and changes have to be made in Michigan. We don't talk about energy policy and how it affects local government. We stopped talking about very big issues, and we just got down to this trivial, mundane divisiveness, like just talking about things that are just clearly divisive. I don't care about this issue, but we're going to just, piss and moan about it because
Right.
this is what we're talking about. And so I think it's just a lack of the clarity. We haven't defined what are the major issues facing local government. I've got a list of what I believe are the major issues facing local government that require statewide change. In Michigan, we have this ticking time bomb, which is called unfunded liabilities. And COVID money kind of masked the problem for a while. We had the COVID stimulus.
Are you
Well, now
speaking
we're
exclusively about pensions? I always hear unfunded
yeah,
liabilities and
yeah,
concept of pensions.
pensions and healthcare liabilities, retiree
Okay.
healthcare
All right.
cost. And so, I mean, we have a good chunk of the state of Michigan right now. Out of the municipalities are filing corrective action plans. So if you're below 60% funded, you got to file a corrective action plan. I think it's like half the states filing without any real meaningful changes to correct that. And so you got 2 to 3 years before that becomes a statewide crisis. The education failures within our state affecting local, our ability to compete with Texas and Ohio for jobs. The energy policy is just not only does it affect our utility rates, but the energy policy is affecting our ability to attract companies to Michigan and to Port Huron. If you look at what's called renewable portfolio standards. They first did it in 2008, I believe. They said by 2025, 10% of your energy has to come from renewable energy.
Right.
Whatever, that was a slow start. Now it's up to 100% by like 235. Well, the issue becomes is no one else is doing that around us. Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee. And so to fund this go to loan strategy, our utility rates are astronomically higher than our neighbors. And so when you get what's called an RFI, a request for information from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the company sends in, hey, we're looking for a site. Pretty simple. We need 50 acres. I need light rail. I need, 325 power, all this stuff.
Right.
They put in there like, what are your utility rates? What's your water and sewer? And also what's your electric rates? Second to labor, utility is like the second largest cost for most manufacturers. And so if you look at Michigan losing the automotive sector to other states, whether that be EV or just general tier one suppliers, they're leaving to other states because it's cheaper to produce there because of our go to loan strategy on our energy policy. That's directly affecting local municipalities, specifically to the utility rates. Water and sewer pumping stations cost a lot more than they used to, but also to our ability to attract jobs. We're not talking about that as an association because it's a political item. Clean energy is a left or right issue. Windmills, solar panels, a left or right issue, but the cause and effect of local municipalities is not.
Right.
And so, and I'm all about it. If the United States comes out with we're all going to windmills by 2035, I'm fine with that as long as we're on the same page with everyone around us. But it's hard to compete for jobs when your neighbors aren't doing the same thing.
Like China, for example. I mean, how do you compete with China on
Yeah.
on environmental policy issues when they don't have to follow it, and their cost of goods is much cheaper.
Well,
It's
I mean, you have to look at the China, the India, who's the greatest economic threat to the United States. I think China has this big speed bump in the road with their structure of government. Okay, you can only oppress people for so long before it doesn't work. I think with India and their population, their growing infrastructure population, they're democratic, and they have a much more stable political system that can, it's not looking for overthrow reform soon. I think India, as they build out their electric grid, will be probably one of the largest direct compete to the state of Michigan in the United States. So India, they've got the freedom item taken care of there. China does not. So I think that'll be a huge, huge, huge challenge to Michigan in the state coming forward.
Are you optimistic about the profession in general, whether at the national level or state specifically? What are your thoughts on
Well,
the
oh
council
yeah,
manager form and city managers in general?
yeah. No, I am, because the city managers I know are some of the greatest people in the world. I mean, the vast majority of managers in the state of Michigan are honest, dedicated, good-hearted people. I mean, just fantastic friends, wonderful people. And so when you talk about the profession, it goes back to who are the people in the profession. And at the end of the day, it'll be just fine. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll work out the kinks and how we do things. But we have good people, and I will tell you, a lot of good people are leaving the profession. That's my concern. We're getting the B list and some of the new talent because nobody wants to put up with this.
Well,
The
you're dovetailing into something I haven't even posted this yet. I received a very interesting email or LinkedIn message last week from an individual who basically said, it's I don't I still I'm still kind of processing it honestly. Essentially, the nut of it was that they thanked me and praised me for all the things I've been doing and communicating and highlighting all the issues that city managers face. And then they said, because of reading your content and following you, I've determined that city management is not for me. I don't want to be a city manager. And they said,
yeah.
but don't take that as a negative. Like, and I'm like, okay, I haven't even responded yet because I'm not sure how to process it. But it's
Well,
like,
I do. I do executive recruitment as my as one of my consulting things. I do a lot of executive recruitment in the state. Um, I see a lot of managers who are not taking that natural progression to a larger community. They're wanting to go to a deputy or department head role.
yeah,
One layer, they say it's one layer below the hatchet, the political hatchet. One layer below the political hatchet, especially folks who have young kids.
yeah,
If you tell people you're going to be 3 to 5 years in a job, well, I want my kids to get through school. So I might as well serve as the deputy manager where I at least get my kids through middle school before they fire me. We also, retention. I talk to a lot of councils and they're like, I said, if you have a manager you like doing a good job, when was the last time you wrote your manager a little note telling them they're doing a good job? Like, when was the last time you've actually sat, like, you leave your council meeting, did you stop and tell them, pull the manager aside and say, hey, just so you know, you're doing a great job. I support you and anything you need. Like, $10,000 pay raise goes a long way. Your council coming behind you and supporting you, far better than cash.
yep.
It
You know,
relieves the stress of the job too.
very true. Very true. Just knowing that they have your back, right? And being,
Yep.
publicly demonstrative of that goes a long way as well. Um, I literally just had this conversation similar to that with another individual and talked about the lack of anyway, yeah, just had that conversation.
Well, I tell councils, if you publicly support your manager, it keeps in check some of the dark elements out there because people
Yes.
can smell blood. When they think a manager is vulnerable, it gets nasty. The attacks fire up. They think there's blood in the water. But when a council sits there and says publicly, our manager is a good manager, we support them and they have our support, it puts a lot of people to quiet.
Yeah, actually, I guess I'll say it because I wasn't really trying to plug the conference for AME or anything like that. But one of the things I'm looking at doing for our conference in June is having a conversation about that manager governing body dynamic and exactly that issue of creating those stronger relationships where you have the governing body out there publicly supporting you and carrying, quote unquote, carrying your water to a degree, right? Because this is supposed to be a partnership, right? This is supposed to be a marriage.
Yeah.
So it's nice to praise those individuals because the more demonstrative you are with that praise, the more the public's going to take that as a cue that, oh, we have competent, effective leadership. We are doing the
Well,
right things. And it's a win-win for both parties.
and if there's ever a time for professional management, it's now. It's this distrust in government. If you look at professionals, managers were born out of the distrust in government, the corruption in government that was so ripe that it's what created the city manager was to somehow make it corrupt, immunity to corruption and cronyism of local government used to be. And so, what back in the 1920s and 30s, what originally started the city management movement is exactly why city managers are needed today, is a complete and utter distrust in all government. I was at a local meeting the other day, and a lady was recording an hour-long meeting, holding up her phone to record this meeting. And her hand was shaking after about the 40-minute mark. And I leaned over and said, "Ma'am, I'm not sure if you know this, but this is being recorded on YouTube, and all the videos are recorded there, and so you can just go back and watch them. You don't need to hold your hand up for an hour and a half." And she looked at me and she said, "You can't trust their recordings." So like that's the level of distrust in government, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you're doing bidding or procurement or doing a new policy, the public assumes the worst. And that's just something that's from national politics prescribed all the way down. So city managers are needed more today than ever before, especially the professionalism, the nonpartisan. We don't talk about political issues because we have real issues to discuss, the important issues. I don't want to talk about trivial partisan politics. I want to talk about roads. I want to talk about good fiscal policy and how we're going to fund the pumps and utilities. Those are the conversations. So I think my outlook on the profession is strong. I'm bullish because the need for public managers and professional managers has never been greater. The greater distrust in government is more you need a professional who can assure people that the policies are being policies and laws are being ruled effectively and we don't have corruption.
All right, James, on that note, I do have one final question. It's not from me. It's from my buddy Micah Gaudet. He's the co-founder of the American Association of Municipal Executives, and he sent me this question for you. Okay?
Okay.
If you could go back in time and prep yourself for what was going to happen, for what you're going to face from 2020 to 2024 roughly, how would you advise them?
Define your credo. That's a Greek term for what you believe. I went to I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor. I grew up in a Wesleyan Methodist church. I went to a small liberal arts college, faith-based. It's called Indiana Wesleyan University. And they had this whole saying, we're going to develop world changers. But one of the first courses they had in our freshman year was you had to write your credo, right? Like write 3-page document. What is it that you believe? What is it that you believe? That is a simple assignment, but a very impactful one if you take it seriously. Like not what your parents told you to believe, not what other people told you to believe, but what is it do you believe? What is it? Fundamental truths. Do you believe there's a God? Do you believe that God is sovereign and in control of everything? Separated but not apart. Um, it's that Simon Peter moment, like, who do you say I am? And then the consequences of that answer. And so my faith was shaped at a very young age, but then I had my own making my faith personal moment where it's like, yeah, I do believe there's a God, and I do believe that he is almighty and sovereign. Once you define that, you begin shaping your worldview in that context of biblical principles. So I view the world from a context of biblical principles and the view that there is a sovereign God in control and that he has plans to make you, prosperous in the future. And so define your faith early on and what is it you believe in? Because I will tell you, things come at you pretty fast. If you, and it is not the time when you're a city manager and when you're leading, whether take away the city manager title, anytime you are leading people, when you're in a position of leadership, that is not the time to decide what you believe. That needs to come well beforehand. You need to define your credo and your worldview on how you will see every issue, because every issue that comes across my desk, I have to view them for the lenses for which my belief is in. And so I tell people define who you are and what you believe before you decide to lead any organization or any person. And then define the worldview and the lens in which you will look at every single issue. My faith and how how I handle the drug recovery programs and how I handle. We have a huge opioid epidemic we're getting over in the recovery community, and my faith has greatly shaped the policy recommendations I've brought. Understand the human nature and that God redeems people and their second chances. That has been huge. My faith is hugely guided to that. Whether it's physical policy and what are the biblical, what does the Bible teach us about finances and how do we do that with local government? So yeah, define your credo, define what you believe in before you decide to attempt to lead anyone or anything.
All right, brother. Well, hey, we talked a little bit earlier about it, about your recruitment efforts. You are part of the Pivot Group Municipal Services. I'm not sure if you wanted to plug that or not, but I'll plug that for you. Was there anything else you wanted to plug or talk about before we exited stage left?
Nope. I just tell all my manager friends out there, thank you for your support. When you see a manager have an issue, reading the paper or seeing on LinkedIn or on the Twitter, another manager have an issue, reach out, call, and email that personal contact. We will never fully know how much it means to that other individual. And so
Amen.
this is a brotherhood and sisterhood. And you have congratulations on you providing a nexus to connect all the different state associations and to give a platform. And in your unique position where you can throw grenades and maybe that sometimes that needs to happen. And so, but I appreciate everything everyone's done.
Thank you, James. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you guys for listening. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered Podcast, a podcast for city managers and public sector executives. If you have not heard, we do have a new job board. The AAME job board is absolutely free to post your senior and executive level recruitments. So if you want to post a job, please go to jobs.aame.org and post those there. Also, we do have the conference, the first AAME National Conference coming up in late June. Stay tuned for an announcement on that. I'm not sure when we're going to be taking registration or opening up registration, but that is coming soon. Also, we do have a model contract review that we did, first version of it in the AAME community. Joining me on that call was Daniel Riley, an attorney in the Northeast. He was on the podcast before. So if you would like to take a look at that presentation and review our first draft of the AAME model contract, we would appreciate your suggestions and feedback. Catch you next week.